Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. Happy 2025, everybody. I mean, you guys are hearing this in 2025. It's a bit odd for us because we're actually recording this at the end of December because
we're time travelers. We're time travelers.
Time travelers, yeah, exactly. We've taken a couple of weeks off over the Christmas and New Year period, but just to get ahead of the game, we kind of decided we'd record this. What day is it today? It's the 18th of December. So yeah, we're just getting an episode in to start the new year off, but giving ourselves a couple of weeks break. So we hope you've all had a lovely Christmas and New Year. We hope the world hasn't ended or something like that. You know, how embarrassing would that be? We put the podcast out and actually there's no one to listen to. But yeah,
well, it wouldn't be embarrassed because no one would know.
Yeah, but I'd die with shame, Felipe. I'd die feeling full of shame and regret. But yeah, anyway. As you said, time travelers. And what we're going to do is we are traveling back today to 1962, and we're going to make this a very casual episode. You know, I think maybe everyone's still a bit hungover from the New Year and Christmas. I'm going to assume everyone is still a bit hungover.
I'm hungover from yesterday.
Excellent. So this is going to be a very casual episode. We're just going to literally talk about Live at the Apollo by James Brown from 1962. We're not going to talk any music history or what it did for this or how it was innovative. We're just going to talk about how bloody good this album is, just as a nice, relaxed way to see us into 2025. So yeah, anyway, how are you, man? Are you good?
Yeah, man, doing great. And you?
Excellent. Yeah, looking forward to the break. I've kind of checked out already for the year. I'm just waiting for that Christmas to come round. But anyway, they don't care about this, the audience, because it's 2025. Yeah,
exactly.
Anyway,
2025 now. So.
Get your head in the game, lads. Cool. Anyway, right, Live at the Apollo, James Brown, 1962. Like we said, not going to even give any historical context. It's just an amazing live album. I want to start off with, let's start off with how it's looked at in history, because it is one of those renowned live albums that people just keep coming back to, that is on the list forever of one of the best. And if we just look at some of the accolades it's received, the Rolling Stone have put it 24th in the greatest albums of all time. Rolling Stone called it the greatest live album of all time in 2015, and Colin Larkin put it at number 248 in his 1000 albums you must hear before you die. It spent 66 weeks on the Billboard 200, peaking at number 2. And I was reading that when the shops, when it was released, the shops couldn't keep up with the demand of how intense people wanted it, and it was just selling out all up and down the country. I mean, that's a testament to how excellent this show must have been, and how big of a guy James Brown was at this time, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he knew he was good, and he knew this album could take him to another level. But the thing is, the label didn't agree with him. How many times we say this in this show? I think it's been proven over time that labels don't know shit about music. The thing is, the big boss of the record label didn't want to release a live album because he had this argument with James Brown saying, like, well, first, if you put a live album out, why would people come to your gig? Which I think is a very stupid argument. The other one was there was no actual new songs in the album, and he wanted he wanted James Brown to record new material, like studio material instead. Sorry, the other reason probably was that James Brown's LPs were not selling well, but the singles were like massive. But the albums were not doing well. So, and again, at that time, people were focused on singles anyway. So it's kind of that's what made you a successful artist in the 60s. If your singles are doing well, Led Zeppelin and the Beatles kind of tried to change the game a little bit.
Well, we kind of time-stamped 1965 when Rubber Soul came out. I mean, again, so many people are very quick to give the Beatles credit for everything, and I don't want to say that there was no band that made an album before the Beatles, but generally we know why the Beatles are so famous, because they were the biggest names to innovate and pioneer at that time. And so we rubber stamp, pun not intended. We rubber stamp Rubber Soul. Yeah, we rubber stamp Rubber Soul 1965 as the album that really showed people you don't just need to write 3 singles and a bunch of fillers. You can write an album full of 10 songs that all matter as much as one another.
Yeah, exactly. So James Brown was trying to do that with a live album. He wanted to do this as a live album, and because the label didn't back him, do you know what he did? He paid for all of this. So basically, he hired the Apollo, which was just under $6,000 at the time, which would be $70,000 in today's money. And
Wow.
he would go bankrupt if the album didn't sell well. So that was a big gamble from James Brown. He knew he would work, or he was really relying on it. So basically, he paid that ridiculous amount of money to hire the venue. He did a residency, like several evenings in a row, and decided to record one specific evening. So basically, he hired all the gear, the microphones, and the equipment for the PA system and everything for the show.
Wow.
And they had these microphones hanging from the ceiling. So, which was how they
Uh,
captured the audience. It might have been one of the first times in history this happened, because I don't know any earlier like live albums that have so much audience sound in it. So you can hear people like shouting, talking,
well,
and everything. It's great.
I was going to say the audience, it's arguably as important to the album as the music,
Oh yeah,
because I'm just trying to imagine what it would be like listening to this live album with fantastic production, everything crisp and clean, all polished, with no audience.
yeah,
It would not be as good as it is.
yeah.
The beauty in this album is the rawness. Imagine if all of James Brown's vocals on this albums were crisp, clean, and polished and produced beautifully. It would not sound good
Or
because he
heavily
doesn't.
edited as people
Yeah,
do
he
nowadays.
doesn't hit every note. There are
No,
notes he misses. There are phrases. There are lyrics he gets wrong. But that's
yeah,
because he's focused on the performance, which is what you want
yeah.
from a live album. But the audience, the back and forths he does with them, I can't remember which song it is, but he's like, he says, I want you to scream, and they scream, and he goes, no. He actually goes, say ow. And the audience go, ow. And he goes, no, not ow, ow. It's just like, he's just having so much fun. And in the song, in Lost Someone, that's amazing, because he's just the whole,
That's the 10-minute one, isn't it?
oh my God, unbelievable. And I'd spend hours listening to that over and over again. It's stunning. I get goosebumps just thinking about it. What
Yeah.
a song. But he's discussing things with the audience, and there's just random, obviously there's lyrics, but then there's random moments where he's like, I don't want you to go and see my neighbour. Da, da, da. I want to bring you home. Da, da, da. It's just like proper ad-libbing, improvising,
Yeah.
but involving the audience. And there's a moment in that song as well where for 2 minutes or so, his voice is so low. And the reason of that is not because of editing. It's not because of mic cut out. It's because I
Away from the
imagine,
microphone.
yeah, I think he's gone away from the mic and gone to one side of the stage and probably talking to the horn section or talking to the audience, and then he goes to the other side of the stage, and then you get 10 seconds of silence before he comes back, and then he's right in the mic again. This is performance 101, isn't it? This is how you perform a show like this to an audience.
Yeah, exactly. And he managed to capture the energy of a live gig. He wanted to do this because he said that any artist who takes his music seriously should make the song sound twice as good live, as when compared to the studio recording. He said, like, if you're good
That's a nice
artist,
comment.
your song should be even better live than it is on record.
Well,
And I think, again, imagine all what really surprised me is, like, with all that investment, think about it, put all your money into something and it has to be good. So most people would just be really careful and try to, I don't know, play safe, like, I'm going to do like a more focused performance. Maybe I'm not going to move around that much. I'm going to just sing correctly and make sure there's no mistakes.
yeah.
He's not really about that. He's about, like, this is my gig, this is how I play, and I want everyone listening to the album to actually feel like they are there in the concert. And I had a feeling there was like 1,000 people around me when I was listening to it.
Yeah.
And it's super cool. I think when you said about not being too polished in a way, what compensates for that is how tight the band is. It's just insanely tight.
I've got here, for me, let me just find it. Each instrument is as important as the other, because they all provide, and I know you can say that, that's such a throwaway comment that you could say about any live album, but if you look at, what did we do before? Peter Frampton, okay?
Yeah.
The vocals and the guitar are more important than the rest of the band. Whilst we said the bass and drums do a brilliant job here, the keyboard player does a great job there, it's Peter Frampton's show. arguably, James Brown does not come off looking as good as he does if the band is not
Oh yeah,
100% on. The bass and drums are keeping the groove so well, providing the
yeah,
backbeat and the backbone to that rhythm section. The guitarist perfectly articulates the chords,
yeah.
really just adding harmonic emphasis, whilst the horns, I swear, their job must have been so all they got to do all night is play stops. Like,
Yeah.
give it to me, duh, give it to me
Yeah.
again, duh, duh. Like that's
But
90%.
you're following the vocal cues. That's not
Yeah,
easy to like to
true,
to
very
hit those
true.
notes exactly like on the
Yeah.
right time.
And
It's
so the horns are there for the stops and the solos, but the backing vocals, I think these are the unsung heroes
or
of the
the famous Flames.
the
That's the name of
famous
the group.
Flames, made up of Bobby Bird, Bobby Bennett, and Lloyd Stallworth, who were James Brown's backing vocalists. We actually
It's
go on.
interesting. So sorry to interrupt you,
No,
but
no, no,
it's
it's fine.
interesting that the I don't know who's what's his name, Fats Gonda is a guy who's
He was the
he's introducing the show. He speaks on the microphone before
yeah.
the band comes in, and he does introduce it as James Brown and the Famous Flames. And the group was sold like this at the time, and it's I don't know why they're not credited in the album cover. Like that should be an album by James Brown and the Famous Flames.
They
That's
feel
what.
as important, don't they?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They add
Definitely.
so much soul and emotional depth
Yeah.
to especially those soul-y songs. Um, Talking of styles and genres, I have to say that there's a I can't. We're going to do more James Brown eventually, as this podcast goes on. As we get into
Yeah.
we're almost at 100 episodes, man. Looking
Oh
forward to that
wow.
one. As we get into the
Yeah.
next hundreds and 200s, James Brown will inevitably come up. But what I haven't done is study him or learn his place in music history, funk history, soul history. But what I do know about James Brown is two things. He's normally the first name anyone talks about when you hear funk,
Yeah.
yet his name is the godfather of soul. And this has always confused me because wait, so you're the godfather of soul, but you're also one of the most pioneering funk acts. And when I hear soul, I think Otis Redding, Donny Hathaway, Aretha Franklin. When I hear funk, I think Parliament, Funkadelic,
Yeah.
Chic, Nile Rodgers. So I think they're two quite distant apart. However, this album, the bridge between soul and funk and that middle ground, James Brown occupies fantastically. And I think the credit has got to go to the person who put these songs in order. Because if you look at this,
Hmm.
hold on, where have I put it? How they switch between funk and soul throughout the whole show. You
Yeah.
start off with "I'll Go Crazy," which is really upbeat and funky. Then "Try Me" is smooth, mellow, and soul-like. Back to "Think," which is funky. Then it goes to "I Don't Mind," which is again mellow and soul-y. Then it goes to the funky bridge and the intro of "Lost Someone," which is funky, to "Lost Someone," which is soul-y. It's
Yeah,
just
and all this,
brilliant.
yeah, all the soul ones are swing ballads, aren't they?
Yeah.
So you kind of going between that like fast tempo, even I would even call rock and roll slash funk kind of
I think it's
vibe.
rock and roll energy for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
yeah. And then you go between that and the swing ballad, so you actually change the vibe and the beat. They really alternate well between those songs, and then credit to the band once again with the instrumental bridges. Right, there's
They're all
like three
brilliant.
sections of the show that they just play this short instrumental piece to connect songs. So the feeling you have with that is they're playing a 30-minute song rather than a collection of songs. It
Yeah.
feels to me like they just connected all the songs in one long piece.
Well,
And
that's
amazing. Yeah.
that's exactly how it feels, and the best way to epitomize that is listen to the end of "Lost Someone" into the medley that comes after, because it's like you said, it's like a theatre show. In the sense that, whilst I don't imagine the band would have had music sheets in front of them, you and I have both done theatre shows, and you sit there and you just sort of watch your page, and then it's like, okay, quick segue into the next song, and you turn your page and you go there quickly. They do that here to such a masterful level that you can't. Do you know what? Right, let me tell you what it reminds me of. It reminds me of those American TV shows where the TV show has a band,
Yeah.
And I don't know which.
Yeah, I know,
I'm not
like David
American.
Letterman.
Let's say
David
Letterman
Letterman
or
show.
Jimmy
Yeah.
Kimmel, one of them.
Yeah.
They'll say David Letterman will say, and my next guest, he's a Grammy award-winning, funk master. It is James Brown, and then the band play, and
Yeah.
as he introduces it. But this is like this. James Brown is like the TV host, and excuse me, and the band are like the TV band. But my
Exactly.
God, I mean, it is a show.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a gig. It feels like a show that he's putting on for the audience with instrumental bridges, medleys.
Yeah, and
Just
it's
amazing.
great. Again, I love the fact that you don't feel the transitions. Then out of the blue, a new song starts, and you're just into it, and he
Yeah.
takes you into the vibe of the next song immediately. Like it's yeah.
Hmm.
I think there's a the amount of energy that man had is it's like unseen in music history, and I feel like there was no other way for him to express himself rather than being on stage, because
Yeah.
I imagine how frustrating it was for him to release an album or a single studio like album and listen to it and think, no, that doesn't have half of the energy I can put on a live show.
I
And I think that was probably frustrating. Maybe that's why he wanted to invest in this album so much.
I think one of my favorite interviews with Frank Zappa, who's one of my musical heroes, is when he talks about live performances.
Yeah.
And the interviewer's asking him, and she says, so every show you do something different. He says, yeah, I mean, I hate every guitar solo I've ever recorded on an album because I know I could have done it better, or if I was doing it live, the energy I would have put would have been different. And I feel like maybe James Brown is of this opinion where he's like, well, having to listen to myself on an album, because on an album you can't put those little extended 5-minute musical sections where he's just talking to the audience or he's just spouting the random lyrics.
Yeah.
You can't get that energy across in a properly polished single.
Yeah.
And so for people like James Brown and Frank Zappa, and I mean, there's many artists like that, to have the freedom of a live gig. And funnily enough, Frank Zappa did the same as James Brown. Once he was established, Frank Zappa would pay for he'd take all the costs on himself, but then he'd obviously reap all the financial benefit after, which is why he was so rich. But for James Brown to have that freedom, to have 10 minutes to do what he likes and to express himself, to exert his energy, it's what people like that need.
Yeah, exactly. And he was like, this is my gig, right?
Yeah.
This is my gig, my band, my show. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. So that's him being the boss, like properly. And he paid off, right?
Absolutely. What do you think? We touched on it briefly earlier. What do you think about that funk, soul, R&B?
I think this
The
album,
switch between.
well, I think when a lot of people would think of James Brown as the guy who sung Sex Machine and I Feel Good.
Yeah.
And those songs are definitely funky. They funk songs. They're not soul numbers, in my opinion. And the early stuff that you can hear from this album, I think it reflects a side of his musical personality that I actually enjoy much more. I think
Me
it's
too.
just,
Me too. And it's hidden, isn't it?
It's got the blues, it's got soul, it's got a bit of rock and roll, and that's and it's so different to what everyone else was doing the early 60s. I think, but for people who are familiar with the James Brown stuff that made to TV adverts and movies, the classic image you have of James Brown singing those funk numbers, have a listen to this album because it's something else, and it's like you wouldn't even think as the same artist in a certain way.
I don't feel that his hits really do justice to how good his voice was.
No,
Obviously, in I Feel Good, you hear there's a couple of wow, like a couple of screams that are really cool. But other than that, I don't think it shows off his voice. Neither does Sex Machine, really. There's moments in the songs. Listen, you know what I'm talking about. The general performance, of course, is good. But compared to this live album where he gets to just let his voice go loose, incomparable.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people, I know a lot of even musicians I know from the blues scene and even country music and other stuff, they really admire what James Brown was doing in the early 60s. And I always wondered why. Now that I've listened to it carefully, I'm like, wow, that
You
makes a
get
lot of
it.
sense. And
Yeah, it makes sense.
it's something else. It's another kind of beast.
Yeah,
It's not
it
it's
is.
and is and it's amazing how you have this again, this tight band and him kind of out of control running around and shouting. And the thing is, I haven't watched the video for this show, but I know he's running around and performing like crazy. I just
Okay.
know
Is
it
there a
comes out
video?
in the voice. There is, I think you can find it on the
Oh,
internet.
wow.
But I found it, but I didn't watch it intentionally because I really wanted to have the feeling of just listening to the album and see if that, because if you see James Brown on stage, if you just see James Brown moving around, even if there's no sound, it's really, really how can I put it? It's an extraordinary performance, really.
Yeah.
You can't keep your eyes out of him. Like it's just great when you watch him perform. But uh, I wanted to see if the music is as good as his visual performance, right? So that's why
Mm.
I've listened to the album without watching anything. And gosh, I could see him running, jumping, and
Yeah.
shouting. It was like I could picture that in my mind.
He's out of
So
breath, isn't he? He's running
yeah,
around, he's energetic, everything.
yeah, and I like this because in this day and age, you can find videos of everything. We live in an extremely visual world, which is good, not a problem with that. Uh, but it's interesting to sometimes just close your eyes and listen to the music
Yeah.
and try to create your own version of that gig in your mind. Try to imagine the faces that were there in the crowd and
Yeah.
how the band was smiling on stage and stuff like that. So I love that feeling of like having my own movie in my head
Yeah.
whilst I'm listening to the music.
Exactly. Well, talking about his voice, I just had some notes that what I found really interesting was obviously Godfather of Soul, as we've said, but his vocals don't remind me at all of anyone who you would typically associate with soul. If you think of Otis Redding and Donny Hathaway, how smooth and silky their voices are, whereas James Brown, his voice is quite
It's more
aggressive.
aggressive.
It's aggressive. It's
Yeah.
abrasive. It's gritty. You know, if you were just to play an isolated note of Otis Redding singing, and you compare that to an isolated note of James Brown, when you hear James Brown in your ears, you're going to go, "Oh, hold on, oh, well, I didn't expect
Yeah.
that. That's quite out of nowhere." Whereas Otis is obviously very smooth. Do you think that? Do you think the soul music, the R&B and soul music, coupled with James Brown's abrasive voice, pushed him to the next level because it was a bit different?
I think that's what it is because in a certain way, in a technical way, I'm not going to say this is a bad thing. He shouts
Mm.
rather than sing at some points,
Yeah.
and no one was brave enough to do that in that
No.
kind of music. Because like if you're singing soul music, it's got to be somehow polished and how can I put it, like clean
Yeah.
and as I said, smooth. You got to sound like that because if you're singing about love, you can't just shout. But
Mm.
I think James Brown had some sort of anger, some sort of a. Well, it's like the dark side of his personality.
Yeah.
It's getting in the way of him just singing smoothly about love.
Mm.
So even if he's singing about love, he sounds angry and desperate sometimes. And I think all those feelings combined, when you look at the lyrics and you hear the way he uses his voice, you think like, how does that even relate to the lyrics? But it works, you know.
Yeah.
It's and he was, they used to call him the hardest working man in the music business. He was playing about 300 gigs a year at that time.
Wow.
So basically this guy is on stage every night, and as
Yeah.
far as I remember, he died in well, I think it was New Year or just before New Year or December or something. And they said that he was in his bed in hospital, like uh, calling the nurses and say like, when do I get out of here? I have a gig to perform. I have a New Year's
Yes, I
gig to
have read
perform.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, so he wanted to play. So he's literally dying, and he still wanted to get up and play. And the thing is, he was so. I, I don't see him as a guy who was passionate about singing. I think he was desperate to sing. I think there's something about it. I think that like it's like he couldn't stop singing and he wanted to shout. I think he wanted to put all his feelings in every song If that song's about love, but I've got a little bit of anger, it's going to come through. That's how I see it. I mean, I'm not talking about any technical aspects of his singing here. I'm just talking about the emotion of it. And I think
where's his
maybe
heart on
that's
his
what makes him
sleeve?
different. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Excellent. I mean, anything else you want to talk about? I mean, I just got here that final medley. Well, no, the final song's Night Train, but that medley
Yeah.
is just so beautiful. And again, the
Please, please,
transition.
please.
Yeah, what is it?
Yeah.
Please, please, please. You've got love, and I found someone.
Yeah.
What a beautiful journey through a whole host of styles,
Yeah.
feelings, and emotions. It just takes you up and down.
Yeah.
And even just the structure of it, it's hard enough to create a medley and to make one song run into another, into another.
Yeah.
But then 5 minutes in, there is a gorgeous key change that just makes my heart melt because it's just so nice that the key they've chosen is perfect. And then it sits on that for a couple of minutes and it's feeling so soulful and so mellow. Then right at the end, there's another key change that feels so triumphant and big and powerful that the medley is, I mean, it's not my, Lost Someone is my favourite, and I want to talk about that after, but second place is this medley. And I think you've got to give credit here. I mean, I don't want to talk about, I don't want to say James Brown wasn't a musician and didn't know music theory, because I don't know whether he did or not. But on the notes, the music director is the trumpet player, Lewis Hamlin. And having no information about who wrote these arrangements, I'm just going to say, you know, guys, anyone listening, if you know, tell us, tell me if I'm wrong. I'm just going to give credit to the musical director. I mean, do you know what? It's going to be a shorter episode, this one, so let's just list off the band because they deserve it. Hubert Perry on bass, Clayton Fillau on drums, Les Boy on guitar, Fats Gonder on organ, Clifford McMillan tenor sax, St Clair Pickney on tenor sax, Al Clark on tenor sax, William Burgess alto sax, Dickie Wells trombone, Roscoe Patrick trumpet, Teddy Washington trumpet, and Lewis Hamilton.
He wasn't there at the time.
And Lewis Hamilton Ferrari. Lewis Hamlin, trumpet and musical director. So massive credit to those guys because, as we said, each of those instruments, although you got 3 trumpets, 3 tenor sax, a trombone, and an alto sax, they all played their part to make this album sound as big as it did. And little arrangements, key changes, the use of dynamics as well, man. The whole show, there's ups and downs, you know, dynamically speaking. Massive credit to those guys, that band, Lewis Hamlin for directing that band, because they sound ace.
Yeah, it's incredible. They sound like one. They sound like it's just, it's one person or one soul making all that sound.
Yeah, exactly. Favorite song? And do you want to talk about it?
Oh, think.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because I love the original, and this one's got another level of energy. It's like, if you can, put the original on the playlist so for people to compare, because it's.
We'll do. Quickly,
it's a song that I like, and I didn't imagine that song could sound the way it sounds live, and it proves James Brown's point about like making the live version better than the album.
Yeah,
I believe it is.
For new listeners and viewers, we have a dedicated playlist in the show notes below. So we're going to put in the whole album that we're talking about, plus any other songs we've mentioned. And although we haven't mentioned any other songs, I will put in a Donny Hathaway song, an Otis Redding song, Aretha Franklin. What else did I say? Chic, Parliament, Funkadelic. I'll put little examples so you can hear what we're talking about, and I'll put in Think that Felipe said.
I have one more I want to mention.
Yeah, go.
It's not the song itself, the transition from I'll Go Crazy to Try Me. The way that so when it's not like when they start Try Me, that song has a different feeling because you're coming from I'll Go Crazy. So the contrast between those two songs is just insane. I think they both songs are beautifully played, and there's no lack of energy when they transition, and they change the feeling completely in a matter of seconds. It's just brilliant. Yeah. So if you don't have time to listen to the whole album, no, you should have time.
Yeah, it's only 30 minutes, isn't it?
Yeah. I'll Go Crazy, Try Me, and Think were my favorite ones. Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with any of them, but funnily enough, my favorites are on the second half of the album. I don't mind. So beautiful, so sweet, soft and mellow. Medley we already spoke about, but for me, Lost Someone. This epitomizes everything good with live music. because you have the time, the space, the adaptability to just let the music go free. And it's not even just James Brown who I'm talking about in this song. My favourite part, and I wonder if it goes under the radar because they just play it so well, the horn section.
Yeah.
Because for 10 minutes, apart from the odd stab here, the odd 30 seconds where it goes, well, whatever, it's got that part where the horns go da 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 da, and then it swings, bit of time, da da da. But then randomly, they'll play that up an octave. And then after that, they'll go down back to what it was. And it's just so engaging.
Yeah.
It's engaging because although the familiarity is there, da, 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 that's the pattern, that's the note, that's the melody, that's the motif. But what keeps you on your toes is, well, hold on, am I hearing it at this octave? Oh my God, they've taken it up one. Okay, we're stuck here for, oh, now we're back down again. It's like an oxymoron because there's familiarity because you know what you're getting.
Yeah.
But then the register they choose to play it in, you don't know what you're getting.
Yeah.
So simple, but so effective, man.
It is. It's just, yeah, it's beautiful. It's well arranged. They really thought it through. And it makes like a long song feel like it's only 3 or 4 minutes. That's how I felt about it. It's like when I looked at, you look at the length and so, oh, that's going to be a long one, and then you just get carried away.
Yeah,
it's super cool. And again, that's probably the song that makes you feel more like you're in the middle of the crowd.
Yeah,
that's the effect they had on me.
And we said already the length of songs. 2 minutes, 2 minutes 14, 1 minute 45, 2:28. 10.5 minutes, 6.5 minutes for the Lost Someone and medleys, and then 3.5 minutes for Night Train. There was a bit of controversy, well, it's currently happening now, but for listeners, it will have been a month ago, about Slipknot. I'm going to see them in 3 days, and they're doing an anniversary tour of their first ever album, and they're only playing that album, which is only 11 songs. And people say, well, hold on. I mean, we've seen bands do this before. They play a few hits at the start, then they play a full album, then they play a few hits at the end. And they've come under a bit of criticism because obviously in this world, ticket prices are ever rising. And people are saying, well, I don't really know if I got value for money. Obviously I haven't seen them yet, but I can't wait. I'm very excited. I love the album. I'm going to enjoy it, whatever. But I get what people are saying. However, this is only 30 minutes long. And we don't know what the price of a ticket was, or what it's like. Well, we don't even know
if the show was actually longer than that.
That's a fair point. Yeah, that's a fair point.
But even though, let's assume even so, only 30 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to come out of this thinking that you got your money's worth, regardless.
You know, when those people who go to the gym and there's like I don't say anything about workout, as you can tell, but people go to the gym and they have, this is like the 20-minute workout that's going to get you in shape, and you leave the gym like sweating. Like instead of spending an hour and a half, some people spend 20 minutes and they manage to burn the same amount of calories. That's it. That's this gig.
Yeah.
No,
exactly.
People probably like dying after the first like 20 minutes of it.
And I'm sure James Brown burned the same amount of calories as a 1.5 hour workout anyway. So,
exactly.
Excellent. All good. Anything else to say, or are you happy?
No, but I just think it's a great choice to start the year. So
well, do you know what? The other thing we've said is because as it's the end of December, we're just waiting to get to Christmas and have a bit of a break. We've said this is very casual. We haven't made many notes. As I said at the start of the episode, we're not going into what this did for funk, how this is innovative, like we normally do. There are 3 other Live at the Apollo albums from James Brown.
All right.
And there's like 10 years after each other. So if we ever feel like having an easy episode, bro, let's just do the next one. Yeah? Live at the Apollo Volume 2, then number 3.
And then the Apollo trilogy.
Yeah. Well, I literally think because the last one was released in 1995, and I don't know if that was. I mean, I don't even know when he died. So that's. But yeah, so I literally think there was. When did he die? 2006. Okay, so I think the Live at the Apollos, you got 62, one in the 70s, one in the 80s, and the last one is 1995. So this, even though we're joking about it being a casual and easy episode for us, it will be fantastic to see the development of James Brown. 10 years. So yeah, in another 10, 20, 30 episodes, we'll do the next one, and we'll make our way through the James Brown Apollo series, yeah?
Oh, yeah, let's do that.
Excellent, cool. Well, guys, Happy New Year. Welcome back. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and thank you for joining us for another Long Live Rock and Roll podcast episode. Terms and conditions: if you are listening on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or any of those podcast platforms, do us a favor, go down to the show. Sometimes it's at the bottom, sometimes it's at the top. Give us a rating, hit the 5 stars, write us a little comment, tell us what you love about the show, and it just does the world of good for us because it shoots us up the charts, means we'll be seen by more people. It's about 30 seconds of your time, but actually means a hell of a lot to us. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to stay up to date with new content. We have episodes released every Monday.
Yeah, thanks for being with us one more time, and I wish everyone a fantastic new year with loads of rock and roll. So keep on rocking, everyone, and don't do anything I wouldn't do.
And as usual, guys, take care and long live rock and roll.